Hello, hello, and welcome back to another episode of Declassify. I can't believe we're already at episode 14 of this season already. It's gone by really quickly, even though I started this venture back last July. And you know what? I'm going to jump straight into it because I'm so excited to talk with today's guest. And this week, our guest is someone that I was actually very nervous and extremely excited to talk with, and it is none other than writer, academic, and highly respected Australian music critic, Harriet Cunningham. Welcome, Harriet.
Hello.
Hello.
There we go.
So I don't really know where to begin because when I first started, not researching you, but when I first came across you, it was quite a way back, and I think I was in high school. I'd say it was in 2012. And as a result of that, I primarily know you as a music critic, but I think you're much, much more than just a music critic. You're also a writer, and I believe now you're also an academic, having just completed your PhD. I was wondering, and I'm very curious, how did you get to the point where you are now through your studies and through your love of classical music?
Yeah, okay. Well, I was brought up in the UK, and I was a child of a classic music family. My mother was a professional, is a retired professional musician, and my father was a doctor, and like so many doctors, he was a very talented musician as well, played the bassoon. Um, And my parents actually met at a music summer school back in the 50s. And that music summer school was a big part of their lives, and then my life as well. So I was brought up around music, with music, around musicians, listening, going to concerts. Yeah, from a very early age. Um, and apparently, this is really wanky, but apparently I heard the Amadeus String Quartet playing Haydn and said, "Mummy, I want to play the violin." Um, anyway, I did, and my godmother happened to be a Suzuki teacher. So at the age of 4, I was hustled off into violin lessons, was part of the London Suzuki group, and continued to play the violin to a reasonably obsessive level, um, to the point where when I was going to university, it was up in the air whether I would go and study music or something else. And to get it out of my system, I actually went to Dartington's College of Arts for a year to do music. They called it a prep course, like an arts prep course, which basically involved me playing for 6+ hours a day, um, before going on to university to study an arts degree. Um, so yeah, I've been playing in orchestras since I was old enough, and then at university, I think possibly spent more time playing the violin than studying Latin and English, including playing in a string quartet to quite a high level, um, to the point that we were the sort of the string quartet that got hired around all the parties and balls and everything, for the university. Um, and all through this, I was still going to the Dartington Summer School and playing there and doing arts management there. And I eventually decided that I've got to get out, because you have to leave. You have to leave your home eventually. So I answered an ad to audition for the Orchestra for British Youth Opera, which was a fairly young organisation at the time. We alternatively called it Opera 18 to 30. It was for the for singers at the beginning of their careers. And I got into the orchestra, and I did a season with them, and then I wrote to the founder and said, "Do you need any help? I'd like to become an arts administrator." And the next day I got a phone call saying, "Actually, we're doing some auditions tomorrow. Would you be able to come down to London and help out?" And so from then on, I was working with British Youth Opera and eventually became the administrator there and did, I think, 3 or 4 seasons before moving to Australia. And when I arrived in Australia, I was basically burnt out from a really, really intense arts administration job. And anyone who's been in arts admin will completely understand that, touring opera company, really intense experience, wonderful experience. Anyway, because I was crazy, about the second or third day I got to Australia, I phoned up the Opera House and said, would you have any jobs for me? I don't expect to be paid. Because I knew that was the best way to get a job in the arts, and ended up working for the Bennelong program. Long story short, ended up at the Australian Music Centre and worked there for 8 years as the marketing manager, which was the most wonderful immersion in Australian music and the Australian music world. So yeah. And as a side hustle, as it were, I've always been a writer. I've always written. I've always written, diaries, novels, whatever, from word go, and was very involved at uni. I was a music critic at the university, and when I came to Australia, I thought I'd like to get some writing, and I'm not quite sure what possessed me, but I basically cold called lots of people. I ended up cold calling the arts editor at the Herald, and at the time Gordon Kerry, the composer, was music critic there, but he was moving on, and we'd had dealings through the Australian Music Centre. Anyway, when the arts editor said to Gordon, "Oh, I've had this weird phone call from this person called Harriet Cunningham," he said, "Yep, sure, she's good." And so I got the gig. So I got the gig in 2000 as an arts critic as a music critic for the Sydney Morning Herald.
That's cool.
And I was the only, and I vividly remember standing in the Opera House foyer with the other music critics, and they were all male and over 50. And I was 30 and heavily pregnant with my first child, and female, obviously. So yeah, that was fun. So yeah, that's been a constant backdrop for 20 years. So yeah.
And would you say that started you writing with all these other publications? Because I've seen all the things you've written for Limelight, and of course continuing with Sydney Morning Herald, as well as your own website and platforms like Witness Performance.
Yeah. After I had kids, I I left the music centre, and I kind of naturally branched out into writing and doing features and all sorts, and so yeah, I mean, so writing across lots of different publications, and also doing copywriting, which was thanks to Judith James, who was at the time at Opera Australia, and I'd worked with her before at the Music Centre, and she needed someone to write the brochure, and she rang up and said, "Harriet, have you ever thought about this? I think you'd be okay at it." And so my first formal copywriting gig was writing for Australia's 2005 brochure.
Were you always interested, well, from your experience in the UK with opera, and then now a lot of your writing, at least when I'm looking for your writing, is actually centered around opera? Was that something you intended, or it kind of naturally happened with the flow?
I'm a bit of a theatre nut, to be honest. I'm the lure of, what they call it, the smell of grease paint. I've always loved theatre as much, not more, but as much as music. I've always loved live performance, and my introduction to opera via British youth opera, and also via just going to performances, had me absolutely hooked, hook, line and sinker. So yes, opera is a particular favorite of me, and probably because of the magic of theatre, as much as, and brings together words, music, and performance, which are three of my favorite things. So yeah.
Oh, brilliant. So if then you have a particular interest in one facet of music, when you're working as a critic for something like the Sydney Morning Herald, do you get a say in the shows that you're assigned to?
Okay, so here's how it goes. You get, at the Sydney Morning Herald, you get no say whatsoever. So they have a lead critic who's was Roger Cavell when I started, and then became Peter McCallum, and they look at the concerts and allocate them across the available writers.
Mm-hmm.
So I wait, and the email arrives, and it says, "You're going to this, this, and this." I go, "All right." And then occasionally I'll also get an email from the arts editor saying, "Harriet, not sure if this is your kind of thing, but we'd really like it covered, and Peter's not available. Can you go to this?" Which is usually something like, I don't know. For some reason, Peter always seems to duck out of the Gilbert and Sullivan. And he definitely ducked the Queen Symphony, as in the music of Queen symphonized. So I got to do that one. And then on other occasions, I get a phone call or an email from the arts editor saying, "Harriet, everyone's all the contemporary music critics are out having a party tonight. Can you go to this?" I was like, "Yeah, whatever. Yeah, sure. Yeah." So yeah, sorry. Short answer to the long answer cut short. I don't really get a lot of choice over what I go to, but that's good. That's fine by me.
That means you're exposed to different performers. And...
Exactly. If I actually chose what I went to, imagine I'd end up going to only things I liked, and that would be terrible, because the things I liked, I mean, only the things that I think I would like, and yeah, and I wouldn't go to those amazing things that you're going, "Oh, could be this, could be that," and you come away going, "Wow, I am so glad I went." So yeah,
that's a good way to live in general, not just as a reviewer, just to try different experiences out.
Oh yeah. It's very, I mean, I think it's an approach which is sort of core to my approach to being part of the whole performance ecosystem, is the business of you go and you you buy into the contract between yourself and the person who's performing something. The contract is that they think they've got something good to show you, and you go in good faith, saying, well, I really want to hear what you think is that you have, which is good to show me, and I'm going to give it my best listen.
I was going to ask you, actually, I suppose you've sort of already answered, if there were any principles you would advise anyone who's perhaps reluctant to go to a performance or see an ensemble that they normally wouldn't be comfortable going to see.
Yeah, I hadn't actually articulated it before like that. So it's good when it kind of falls out of your mouth accidentally. But it really is that it's not easy to put on a performance. And if people have gone to the effort, then they think they have something to say. And so if there's something to say, then I'm just interested to hear it. I'm just curious. I think the thing that I hate most is when people don't respect their audience, or underestimate them, or aren't authentic about what they have to say, basically. They don't have a burning passion to communicate something. Either they're just dialing it in, or they're, I don't know. And frankly, that's when I get pissy and write bad reviews.
Well, I suppose talking about critiquing or criticism, I don't know if you want to talk about it, but I remember having already known your work, and then your name popped up again in 2015 over all these publications because of the incident with Opera Australia.
Yes, that was quite funny. Yes. Well, it's not completely relevant, but its useful background is that I had been working for Opera Australia doing copywriting from 2005 through to 2012. And then again, because they begged me in 2014 as well. But I was really over it. I mean, there's a limit to how long you can copyright for one organization, just because you end up coming up with the same things. So I don't know what, I was getting something out of my system or what, but I was just so shocked by the way that Lyndon Terracini had come in and taken and basically sought to define opera as this opulent, stagey society night out thing. And the biggest cognitive dissonance in my head was the fact that the first time I met Lyndon Terracini was in Darwin, where I was at the Darwin Guitar Festival on behalf of the Australian Music Centre. And I seem to remember Jerry Brophy was there as well. And Lyndon Terracini was doing something really wacko, like El Cimarron or something like that. I don't think he was naked. I suspect he was probably topless. Anyway, he was basically doing the full weird shit thing. And then to meet him and for him to come out with this stuff about, no one wants to see, the sad truth is that no one wants to see bliss. People actually want to see the magic flute, and basically coming out with this stated intention to dumb down. And I looked at it and I thought, are you for real? or are you there must be something else going on here? Because I mean, quite apart from being a successful singer and doing weird shit, he'd also been running the festival up in can't remember, fill in the word, begins with B. Another example of me not being able to. Northern Rivers. Norpa obviously begins with B, yes. He'd been doing Northern Rivers, which was a very broad program. And it was like he sort of suddenly had this, road to Damascus change of heart.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, I want to look at this and see what he's doing. And so my piece actually, the point of my piece was actually that I said, I think Lyndon Terracini is trying to sneak new music in the back door and make big opera pay for it, because in tandem with his main stage seasons, he was doing quite a few innovative things around the edges. But unfortunately, the fact that the main stage season had become entirely vanilla meant that the flagship of Australian opera had suddenly become a museum piece, as far as I was concerned. So yeah, and of course it all then got really exciting because Lyndon Terracini got angry, and then he banned me, and then his management at the time were not wildly competent and copied me his email, and I made that email public, and oh my word. The next thing I know, I was getting emails from my music critic colleagues in London going, respect. So yeah, it was fun.
It's such an odd response to a piece of journalism because, of course, naturally it would spawn more unnecessary PR for that company.
Yeah, no, it was unfortunate, and it was also it hit a nerve because obviously a lot of subscribers and singers, and he was alienating a lot of subscribers and singers.
Yes.
And to a certain extent, that's completely the right of an artistic director. An artistic director has to come in and they have to do their own thing. And if they don't do their own thing, then there's something wrong. And for example, Simone Young, yes, when she took over the opera, she, for example, there were certain singers, certain extremely high profile, fabulous singers who she said, I don't think this particular singer can sing Italian. I don't like her singing Italian. I don't want her in these roles. And it was roles that she'd made famous, a Puccini role that she'd made famous. So, and various singers under the Simone, well, of course, under the Simone era, under the Richard Hickox era, various people went, yeah, I'm just not that artistic director's cup of tea or whatever. And that's the nature of the beast. But I think Lyndon Terracini had less did his picking and choosing with less diplomacy and which gave an impression of arrogance, which made him lots of enemies, I think.
For our first intermission is a pick from Harriet, and this time it's from Puccini's famous La Bohème, and Act 4, from the moment where Marcello realizes Mimi is dead. In Harriet's words, this moment illustrates the emotional kick of opera and of big orchestral music. This excerpt is a 1997 remastering of the 1958 original recording of this opera, featuring Maria Calais, Anna Moho, and Franco Riccardi as lead tenor.
Che sia grave? Non credo. Marcello è spirato. Getta a voi. Vedi, è tranquilla. Che vuol dire? Quell'andare e venire, quel guardarmi così! Coraggio! No!
In fact, you mentioned him sort of distilling operatic repertoire on the main stage to this very simple form. I think I was in high school when he became the artistic director, and I went to high school in the city, so all the flags changed to just like like this heavy rotation of Mozart, then Puccini, then Mozart, then Puccini. And I think it's still the same set of repertoire that we're getting, just on every 3 years it sort of changes. Do you think that's two things, like a response as a company, because they realize that they're struggling to stay afloat financially, that it will guarantee one certain type of audience, someone who just wants, like you said, as a kind of a fancy night out, and that form of theatre offers you that experience of being in a certain class, or a historical experience of being in a certain class, experiencing this kind of music, as well as making sure that we had a degree of tourists coming in, because I know they do make a rather large proportion of that audience.
Where to start? Yes. So in many ways, Linden's approach, well, he certainly characterizes it as crisis management. And I haven't looked through their books, but yeah, I'm sure that, pretty much arts management is basically crisis management. And when you're the biggest arts company in the country, then it's the biggest crisis. So yeah, I completely get that. So he basically chose a strategy, and I disagree with his strategy, but his strategy was certainly defensible, in that he basically chose to maximize the maximize income by going for the high margin operas, which are either retreads, existing much loved productions, or new co-productions. And he was also adamant that people buy opera tickets to see the latest greatest singer, and so was budgeting towards overseas singers, many of which would come. Who would not be particularly well known. And I mean that's a classic strategy for an arts organization, is to, and especially in Australia, is to, you want to pick up the great talent in the show, so in the year before they hit the really big time, and then you can say, so Bryn Terfel was booked to come and sing full staff in Sydney in, can't remember. Anyway, Bryn Terfel did his first full staff in Sydney Opera House. Wow, great. We had him first. And so I think, I totally see the logic behind getting overseas singers who haven't yet made it into the big time, who you've heard and think are terrific. So there was that obviously put a lot of people offside as well, because Australia Australia struggles. Australia would like to have give a stage to its own talent, and give opportunities to Australian singers. And so that was seen as reducing opportunities for Australian singers. It's not right or wrong. It's a strategy, and it was it was a very clearly laid out strategy. It was coherent strategy. I just think it's got lots of. He didn't address the downsides of the strategy, alienating not only Australian singers and musicians, but also an Australian audience who loves to follow their own singers. The local boy, local girl made good. Friends who, people like the wonderful singers like Emma Matthews or Taryn Feebig. Oh yeah, no, she's still in favour, but all sorts of singers who people would go to the opera to hear that particular singer, and then of course, no, not in favour anymore, or their perfect role has been taken by an overseas singer who's the next big thing and exciting. And so that there was that backlash. And then I think the other main thing was the narrowness of the repertoire, which I think is a major oversight, because it's turned away a lot of subscribers, because they don't want to see Moffat Oxenbold's Madame Butterfly again, because even though it's just gorgeous, and I've seen it about 6 times, and I've written marketing copy for it about the same number of times as well, but I just don't need to see it again. And nor do many subscribers. So and not only that, they hear Verdi all the time, and they hear Puccini all the time, and they don't actually need to see a little known Verdi opera or a back catalogue Rossini opera. They would actually like to see something really interesting. So I think fundamentally the homogenizing of the main stage program comes across as a as an underestimation and a patronization of the audience, which is very which does damage.
It feels like a really disappointingly reductive presentation of what opera is, because it's a living dramatic theatre piece and we're only getting a very, very limited slice of what we think opera is. Although they did...
But it's also pretty drastically patronizing towards tourists as well. Yes. I mean, I remember people saying, oh, when we put on Beggar's Opera, we got really good ticket sales from tourists because it had the word opera in it. Well, yeah, but you know, if they really want the opera experience, then work with the cruise company and have your young artists do an opera on the opera house steps or something, which is the champagne and lovely frocks experience. But to offer up a banal, something which is, well, banal or hackneyed or predictable, doesn't, just for the tourists, does not does not bring any kind of prestige to the opera house. I don't think. And or also, Australia.
Yes. And for tourists, I mean, if they want to go see something in the opera house, they will, because the word opera is in the name of the building itself. So I think it will attract tourists regardless.
And actually, Sydney Opera House has a damn good program, and they will find something that they will enjoy going to. So yeah.
Exactly. Well, on the flip side, and hopefully slightly more positive, I feel as if the burden of this new programming and experimental things and bringing audiences on a journey falls onto smaller ensembles, particularly the chamber opera companies in Australia. And I think they're also more willing to do a few more of those, experimenting with concerts online, particularly during this time. And I think I read a piece by you not too long ago about Gertrude Opera, and they did a performance online.
Yes. They did the Yarra Valley Opera Festival online. And yeah, it was terrific. I mean, it was actually, I say it was terrific. It was rough as guts. And but it was fabulous. Their one polished piece was, I'll have to look it up, but it was the one about Ned Kelly's sister. Maybe it was Mary Kelly. Anyway, and that was absolutely beautiful. But also Pinchgut Opera did a sensational online presentation of madrigals by Barbara Strozzi. I have to get my mouth ready for this. Barbara Strozzi. And that was really brilliant. And you can't see it in the UK because of I think they're hoping to sell it overseas, but it's only licensed in the Australian territories at the moment. But that was really terrific. And what else did I see? Oh yeah, Victorian Opera did they streamed a few operas, and including 3 new operas, which they didn't have any live action to it. They actually just had the music, and then they had the subtitles, the text. But it was a really fascinating experience because the libretto was the most beautiful poetry, and I found instead of being words, music, theatre, it was words and music, and that was totally compelling as well. So yeah.
Do you think the current circumstances, although they're very challenging, and I've noticed a lot of the headlines around the world when it comes to arts companies, Opera Australia and the Met both struggling to stay afloat because of this. Do you think, however, on the flip side, it's encouraging all this experimentation and a bit more leeway for these companies to try things they normally wouldn't, because you can now.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I can't be 100% Pollyanna, and I like to be a bit Pollyanna about these things because that's the way I am. But in a way, the smaller arts companies, because they've always existed on the smell of an oily rag, they're no stranger to hardship. And they are no stranger to sudden change and, you know, funding falling through, disasters. That's not to say that they're not suffering. They are. It breaks my heart to see the amount of suffering amongst artists, performers, musicians, singers, and and also musicologists, everyone involved in the performance industry, theatre technicians, all of these people who overnight have lost their jobs, and with no, I mean, they were the first out and they'll be the last back in. And it's not the same with sports. Rah rah, it's very annoying. So yeah, my heart goes out to them, but I think in many ways smaller companies are better equipped to deal with difficult circumstances in purely practical terms. Look, they're used to taking risks, and their whole business model is built around risk. And I think that's, in fact, comes to the heart of one of the things that I find difficult about Opera Australia, is that their business model their company has grown to the size where it is so large that to keep it afloat, they become more and more risk averse. And when I say they, it's all sorts of people. Their accountants, their board. I don't think. Well, I know that Lyndon Terracini is not an inherently risk averse person, and I know that the company's full of lots of people who have no real problem with risks, artistic or otherwise. But it becomes this great leaden weight when you have this huge infrastructure and this huge payroll and this huge so many liabilities, that the board and the chief executive become completely hamstrung and unable to sign off on any degree of risk.
For our second intermission is another pick by Harriet, and this time it's a new Australian work. This is an aria in Anno Domini from Australian composer Mary Finsterer's opera Biographica.
I fell with child in Anno Domini 1500. I left my 3 children and took to the plains, to where the streams will they want to follow me to Pavia your youngest, your joy is dead. And alone, a darkness well inside of me. Take this thing, this monster, this spawn of death, this vile tumor eating my womb. The prize most high. Rip this toad from me, if I am to lose them. I want no thought of a child. Bring me slippery elm, rob the field with vinegar. Bring me yeast, nutmeg, purge, purge Take this thing.
Do you think that's, I mean, I suppose many large art companies do this, their reasoning for narrow programming or being afraid of taking any risks or working with local practitioners would be that it's a financial risk, always a financial, like a huge financial risk, despite the fact that Opera Australia receives about $25 million of national funding every year. And in 2018, I think they were the world's most successful opera company, that they only needed to sell half their tickets to be able to make a turnover every single night.
Yeah. Look, I don't know the numbers. I mean, the implication of is you're implying that it's not fair.
Yeah. Yes.
Damn right, it's not fair. I don't know that it's. I don't. It's not wholly the opera's fault. It's government policy, and various things like that. They're funded through one government to take risks. They introduce new programs, blah blah blah. They have to then the next government might cut their programming or say, we don't want you to do that. We want you to do this. Basically, a lot of it's a matter of leadership, and when I say leadership, I mean cultural and political leadership, as well as just financial, business, all of that.
Do you think that perhaps there is an intentional disconnection between running something that is fundamentally an art form, like it's a commercial business?
Yeah, absolutely. There was a phase coming out of the 90s where coming out of the whole Gordon Gekko Wall Street greed is good thing, where and management consulting was this big thing, where these guys, really, really smart guys, and yet they were all guys and they were all white, came in and told businesses how they could run their business. And, there's been lots of TV shows and, how to turn around a business and everything.
Mm-hmm.
And this extended across all kinds of businesses, and you saw it extend into the arts as well. You get the consultants in and they go, oh, there's the classic story about, oh, you've got 14 violins all playing the same thing at the same time. Couldn't you just cut it down to 2 and amplify it, and all of that kind of stuff, which is and not as bad as that, but there's frequently a background, a subtext of arts. People in the arts aren't good with money, or people in the arts aren't good at business because they're artists, and head in the cows. I mean, the fact of the matter is, some of the best business people I've ever met are artists, and some of there's some people who can make magic out of nothing,
Mm-hmm.
and also who can just spin the most amazing deals. Let me put it out there. It's never been a problem that artists are just not good at managing money. That's complete crap. However, that has been a subtext at times. The arts is a not-for-profit business, and that is fundamental, because it's not for financial profit, because it's all about making art. That doesn't mean running at a loss is good, but the fact is that art costs, and art pays back in more ways than just financial. And this is something which has been, it can be very difficult to articulate, and in certain political environments becomes impossible to articulate.
Yes.
So you can write all the opinion pieces you want about cultural diplomacy and music making you smarter, and the social benefits of Mozart, and you can write it until you're blue in the face that going to Puccini makes you more empathetic, but in certain environments it just doesn't fly, and that is profoundly, it's something that I just have to sit with and feel sad about at times.
Like we're constantly defending the arts.
Yeah, absolutely. And I actually was having lunch with someone who was talking about going onto the board of someone in the business world who was talking about going onto the board of a major arts company, and sort of saying, oh, and they might have to, but I'm looking at it, and from what I'm hearing, they'll probably have their grant cut, because I mean, the economy, and we all have to tighten our belts. And I just lost it. The budget of that particular organization is about 1% of the budget of the salary of one single executive at this particular organization. If you really want to cut the grants more, just defund us, take the money away, drop it. Then we won't have to do all this. We can just turn around. We can go to philanthropists. We can all drive taxis during the day. Just drop it. And part of me honestly feels like that. It's you've doubtless heard phrases like funding for failure and things like that.
Yes, definitely.
And you've heard of people saying they're drowning in paperwork, or I've just lost a week of my life doing a grants application, or etc. etc.
I've been
Is
that
that what
person.
I bet you have. I sure have.
Yes, because it is exhausting, because you feel like you're begging to do
Yeah,
work,
yeah,
or being paid to do work at least, and it's a tiny drop of money. Sometimes you're writing a grant application for maybe just $1,000 just to pull something
yes,
off.
yeah,
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 a lot
yeah.
of paperwork. Oh gosh, and now it's going to cost more to do a humanities or arts degree in Australia, so it's kind of all happening at once.
Oh, yeah. Although, as it looks like, it hasn't changed the numbers at all. I mean, maybe it will
Ah,
ongoing, but I just think it's completely bizarre, and I don't like having political arguments because they never go anywhere. But it just feels personal.
yes, it's difficult for it not to.
Yeah, yeah. It feels personal on artists.
Definitely, yes. And trying to explain that to everyone, that the arts, the one thing that we all turn to, music, art, television, theatre and books, is actually something worth supporting, feels sometimes like a bit of an uphill battle. In fact, on another note, I think when we first spoke, you mentioned the PhD you were completing and have now completed, and now you're a doctor, as well as the conversations you've had recently in the last year or two around the idea of the decolonization of music, as well as I having recently read several of your AMC articles about diversity and opera at the end of the last year. I was wondering how your research has then informed your ongoing work.
Yeah. So, well, I mean, as you know, I've just finished a PhD, and it was a sort of passion project, an accidental passion project, which is probably what most PhDs are. Certainly for people like me coming to it later in life, about the Dartington Summer School in the 1950s, and how that place became a bit of a hotspot for British modernism in the second half of the 20th century, and looking at the makeup of the kind of people who went there, and basically it was the polar opposite of the kind of night at the opera that Opera Australia is proposing, which is full of older white people, well dressed, of a certain class, all who probably all know each other, certainly all speak the same language, and have all seen it before, but they love it. Whereas this, what I was writing about, were people were expecting to meet new people, and they were expecting to be challenged, and a diversity of ideas and of backgrounds and of cultures was essential. But also, when you think of the 50s and you think of white picket fences and monoculture, it was quite radical as well. So I think that's what got me thinking about it historically, and then just with that in mind, over the last 2 or 3 years in particular, I mean, Black Lives Matter, yes, but also the various movements coming out of things like Dark Emu and the whole the First Peoples of Australia, and all of a sudden, I, who am a, white Anglo-Saxon woman, suddenly heard the message, which is, we want you to hear us. And I went, bloody hell, I've made a life of listening to people, but I've been ignoring. I haven't been listening. I've been listening to some things, but I haven't been listening to everything, and I need to listen harder. And it's been, and I'm at the very beginning of a journey, and it's, I went to a concert in the Sydney Festival in 2019. No, 2020. Yeah, 2020. And I will look up the name for you. But the guy, Jeremy something. Anyway, he's classically trained singer, pianist, and also First Nations Canadian. He spoke. He was a fantastic musician, played beautifully, but he also spoke from the heart about being. That's right. Part of his project was listening to archival recordings of his elders singing and incorporating this into his music. And so this was what his project was about. And coming to Australia at the beginning of 2020, he said, he was seeing many similar themes with the Indigenous people of Australia. And this thing that he said, and it just stayed with me. He said, it was so, he just said, we just want to be heard. And I thought, yeah, it's not a big thing to ask. People want to be heard. When you're a kid, you want to be heard. You're going, mum, mum, mum. But people aren't being heard. They're just being, anyway. Like I said, I'm at the beginning of my journey. So I think I'll always be at the beginning, but it's good to start things.
I think that's really beautiful, actually. And was it Jeremy Dutcher?
That's it, Jeremy Dutcher. Yeah. It was such a good festival as well. I mean, Sydney Festival director, he's sensational, and his approach was to listen to, so so he could have Jeremy Dutcher, but he could also have wacky Sydney Chamber Opera, European modernism, and totally nutso gypsy Baroque dance. So yeah, I mean, it was great. It was my kind of festival.
And that's, I think, a wonderful and beautiful way to conclude, by highlighting a celebration of all the different things that humans can do. And we should all be celebrating the amazing different things that humans can do. I really can't thank you enough for taking the time out and having this conversation with me. I've actually learnt so much about also, the world of music critic, but also thinking about opera differently. And you've encouraged me to listen deeply and to listen harder. And I'm sure you've encouraged many people in our audience to do the same. So thank you so much.
Thanks very much.
And for anyone out there who wants to check out more Harriet and the rest of her work, I've popped all the links to her website as well as her various writings below, and also some of the articles that Harriet herself has recommended. You'll probably catch her reviews in various publications like Limelight, Witness, Performance, and the Sydney Morning Herald for years to come. Thank you to you all for listening, and catch you next time.